Welcome to Radicards TV on Radicards.com. I'm your host, Patrick Greeno, and today we have joining us Brian Hayes, owner of LinguaSportsCards.com, link below. And he's going to join us for this segment of Radicards Questions. If you're unfamiliar with this segment, it's 3 questions. We talk about them for 5 minutes each with a standard deviation of 3 to 5 minutes for a little bit of miscellaneous dialogue. So let's get to it here. I always forget the timer on this, man, every single time. Question number 1. What are some of the pros and cons to buying retail versus buying hobby?
Well, I think some of the pros to retail is a lot of times it's relatively cheap. If you're on a budget, you can get a nice selection of cards. Can get a good look at base sets, and you can do so relatively cheaply in a lot of cases. The cons are, I would say that a lot of the better hits are sometimes left to hobby-only releases or hobby-only boxes. So I think it's maybe, generally speaking, once again, just generally speaking, it's a little bit of, or you sort of get out of it what you put into it financially. You're in retail, more often than not, you're not going to pull great hits or maybe expensive hits, however you want to call it. Hobby, you've got better shot, but I think retail is good for just as a change of pace, or for newer collectors or younger collectors. You can get that variety there. And the other big thing too about retail is that it's just not everyone's got a card shop around, and it's just nice to be able to go in there and just to have a physical look at the cards sometimes. I mean, obviously with the internet, you can you have access to all the hobby stuff, and you can buy stuff, and most people go that route. But sometimes it's just nice to be able to go someplace, actually look at a physical, tangible product before buying. I think retail's real good for that.
Good stuff, man. Yeah, I like them both formats for different reasons. I like the hobby format because I like to go and look at shops, what else they have. They might have a dollar box I'm totally into, but this specifically is buying for wax, and then when I'm there, I feel like I might have to pay a premium, but the variety might be better. I might be able to buy some higher end stuff if I have a little bit more buying power. I do appreciate that. Retail, a little bit more affordable, and what I like about retail is often there's exclusive retail only inserts. And retail, by its design, comes with high risk environment for cards. And so if cards aren't pulled, they might be hard to find after that retail run goes through its entire lifespan and then gets moved from the retail store to some other location so they can fill that space with new product. So oftentimes, kids might go in there and shuffle things around, and so cards might come out to be maybe not in the best condition, and so they're susceptible to higher risk situations, which makes them maybe harder to pull in good shape, and when you do pull them, they might be very difficult finds, very difficult pulls. Back in '96, retail exclusive parallels were a bigger deal because of this specifically, and sometimes the insert sets in retail were even more difficult to find than they were in hobby, being their exclusive counterparts. So for example, in baseball, they had 96 studio silver press proofs numbered to 100, whereas they were retail exclusives. The gold and the bronze were found in hobby packs, and they were numbered at 500 and 2,000 respectively. And you'd think that the metallic run going from bronze, silver, gold, it would ring out to be the further down the line you go, the rarer they get. But in fact, the silver is the hardest one to find because it was a retail exclusive parallel. In 2010, Bowman Chrome provided us with purple refractors as their retail exclusive. I thought those were cool. But I like the concept of being going to retail and getting the chance of pulling these retail exclusive cards. I think it's really great, and it keeps retail competitive in the market as like, we're here and we provide something unique that you're not going to find in the hobby market. I think that's cool. And for guys that have minimal buying power, I think it's an important option because it gives us a chance to get some stuff for a couple bucks.
Yeah, I know for me, when I was a kid, there wasn't a card shop around. There was no internet around. I was buying exclusively from like retail outlets, like local convenience stores and stuff. It's interesting that you mentioned retail in the 90s because I would say, if we're just talking about retail in particular, that market really has changed over the years. Now, I mean, where do you go buy retail products? It's at big box stores, more or less, Walmart, Target, Toys R Us. That's where you're going. You don't see card packs in every little shop like you used to do. So even if we're just confining the discussion to the retail market itself, it's really changed over the years. But I think you make a good point here about the retail only products. Like we talk so much about hobby only exclusives and parallels and inserts, but you're right. There are also retail only, and if you don't get a hold of those when they're first released, they are hard to come by, and I think that's a good point that you're making.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Good things to think about. Question 2. What are some differences in value and collectability of vintage and modern?
So the big thing between the two is with modern, you're oftentimes collecting players. You don't know how their career is going to pan out. So the vintage market, everyone, all the players, they're retired. Everyone has seen how their career has went, how that person's life has went, what controversies. It's very clear. There's a better understanding of not just the card, but the person pictured on the card.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the modern, the cards obviously it's a much different world today with, game use and autographs, but still there's an extra element of risk in modern because so often the player's story hasn't been written yet. And I think that's the big difference that I feel when, I'm much more familiar with modern cards than vintage, but at least with vintage, I always feel like I know that person, I know the card, there's an understanding there, or if I don't have that understanding, I can find that out. Modern stuff, there's many more variables in play, I feel, with how that card value is going to project going forward.
Yeah, those are good things to think about. Certainly, that there's a proven market with vintage players, right? They've proven themselves, and modern guys, give them a chance to develop. The other piece of that I think about too with vintage is that those cards went through significant high risk environments when they growing up, right? Because the baseball cards back then were sort of a novelty, and so people didn't know how to care for them like we do now. There weren't pages and binders and boxes and sleeves and top loaders and magnets and yada yada yada. So we had rubber bands. We'd organize them from card 1 to the end of the set, and then we'd band them up and throw them in the shoebox. So we have condition issues, significant condition issues. Quality control on the manufacturing side hadn't yet caught up. So we have a lot of centering issues and registration issues and print defects and print spots and different things like that throughout the early to mid-early part of the hobby, essentially, right? The 1880s, when baseball cards became more mainstream, leading into the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and even into the early 80s, before quality control became a thing that manufacturers would use to measure the quality of the output. So they might be focusing more on the ISO 9000 piece of it instead of just like pumping turning the switch on and let the print run go for whatever. And so the old stuff, trying to find it in high shape, is harder to do, as we know. There's significant differences between, say, a 6 and a 7 to an 8 to a 9 and a 10 when we're looking at vintage cards, and those are vast different price points. The further back you go, the harder it is to find high quality, top shaped stuff, and it's just low pops for a lot of that stuff. And so in that regard, I feel vintage has more collectability because the value associated with it is kind of firmly set in stone, right? It's forever valuable, and it consistently goes up. I mean, it's going up more now in the last 5 to 7 years than I've ever seen it go up. Mint copies of Nolan Ryan's rookie have almost doubled in price within just the last 2 years. It's really amazing to see that stuff happen. And as far as modern goes, it's a different kind of collectability, right?
Yep.
We have a lot of rare pieces, low serial number stuff from, say, the 90s, even the early 2000s. It's still very hard to find, very highly collectible with a certain niche market. Those things maybe not have, had encounters with high-risk situations like the rubber bands and the shoe boxes, but harder to find. And a lot of stuff being hard to identify as rare might be thrown in, say, dollar boxes. So stuff is kind of subtly collectible in that capacity, highly collectible for the knowledgeable collector. And valuable. It can be very valuable. And both of those categories can be highly valuable based on one, vintage being condition sensitive, and modern being exceptionally rare. Just to see it, just to find it.
Yeah.
A good example of that is 96 Select Certified Mirror Gold. The first time I saw one of those in person was at the 2015 National Convention. I had never seen one in person before that. I'd always seen pictures of them online. I'd seen eBay auctions, but I'd never seen one in person. And that's a card that's just highly valuable and highly collectible because it's just darn rare. So
Yeah.
I think they're closely related in different ways. They're collectible and valuable for different reasons.
Yeah, I would say how I would maybe how I take a look at it is I feel like with modern stuff, especially stuff since let's say post 2000, I always like look at the cards in terms of substitute goods where you could have rare cards serial numbered to like let's say 50 or less or 100 or less, but even for that card like it's a rare card, but if I don't get my hands on that one, there's going to be another set with that player in some low serial number. So there's just another card from another set to get. There's all these substitute goods to the point where serial numbers, at least I feel like they've almost lost all meaning. Whereas the vintage, no serial numbered. There's just a handful of sets, mainly tops there for years and years. And so you're really talking about. I think there's a better consensus, I guess, in the market about which specific cards and sets to go to, generally speaking, versus modern stuff where it's just everything's spread out, where at the end of the day, a card might be rare, but if you don't get your hands on that one, there's just another set, another low serial print run to find.
Good stuff,
Yeah.
man. Good stuff. Question 3. How does overpaying influence market volatility, and what does it mean to other collectors?
Well, just speaking personally, I know I've overpaid a few times on cards that I really want.
Sure.
And
Guilty.
yeah, and I'm okay with that. Like, as long as you understand it and you're at peace with yourself, it's something that I do. I mean, I try not to if I don't have to,
Right.
but I will. And so it's tough to say because what I'm looking for, maybe the market in general isn't looking for quite as much. So I guess the point is, like, if I overpay for that card, I don't know if like one transaction or just a handful of transactions is going to influence the market, the larger market in general. I think you can see that once, maybe going back to vintage, like, especially in some of those auctions where the values keep increasing over time.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say for not expensive vintage or extremely rare cards, but just general cards that are still really good cards, but are just, once again, there's lots of low numbered and autograph cards out there for various players. Overpaying for some of those, it really takes. I don't think that's going to be enough to like really influence the value of that card long run, how the market views that card. I think at the end of the day, it really matters player performance. Who is the player on that card? What is his performance on field? That's really what's going to drive the value of that card in either direction going forward.
I see it like this. If I overpay for something and now there's a record of, say, $1,500 for this one card, let's just say, because I happen to have a lot of money coming in at the time and I had been looking for that card for a really long time, I hadn't seen one previously, I buy it for $1,500. Now there's a record of a purchase for that card for $1,500. Okay? So, the next guy, this guy that still needs the card, might not have the same buying power as me, sees another auction from a seller, and the seller sees my listing that's sold, or the one I bought, says, "Wow, I should list this for $1,500." There's a record of a $1,500 sale for that card, but I'm the only buyer at that price. But the seller thinks that he can get that same price from somebody else, knowing that it's highly unlikely. I know it's highly unlikely because the next guy over might just pay $500 for the card. Yeah. So now the guy that still needs the card now has to pay $1,500 for that card because the seller thinks he can get $1,500 because of my purchase. So that's the kind of volatility I see in the market today with guys that they're okay overpaying, but they don't realize what's happening to the market is it's becoming unstable in that capacity. Now cards that should sell for $350 are being marked up to $1,500. Cards that should sell for $25 are being priced at $100. And so there's these things because there's the one guy, let's say, or two guys that don't care how much they spend because they're not interested in learning the market, right? Learning value and having a degree of patience. And so and they have a huge pot to pull from for cash, so it doesn't matter to them. So there are these things, these specific traits that collectors, I think, should feel like they have a responsibility to have to maintain a stable market. And that like I said, it comes down to patience, understanding, education, and market values, so that they're not creating an unstable market for other collectors that don't have the same buying power. But I understand it's a free market economy. You can do whatever you want. I get that. But, what does it mean for other collectors when they have to now see high auctions priced for way over the market, outside of the one instance that I say I paid for 3 times over par?
Yeah, I would say, I'm not sure, but my hypothesis would be now with the internet, people would be less likely to overpay because compared to 20 years ago, if you don't see a card, I feel like there's more of a chance that you're going to see that card eventually again on the line if you're patient enough. Whereas like 20 years ago, if you were at a card show or a card shop, you saw a card and you didn't make that purchase right then, knowing that you're going to overpay, you might be feeling like this is the only time I'm going to have a chance for this card. And so I'm wondering now with just more resources, on the online community and all that, if people are generally speaking more patient or less patient. I guess people would be a little bit more patient, waiting for cards, but I don't know. That's something I'm actually pretty curious about.
So something I like this conversation because patience is something that I think can come when you're ready to have it in your collecting arsenal. If you're okay missing out on an auction, even a one-of-one printing plate, and realizing that's just this batch of printing plates, there's going to be another batch in like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever. Like, It's okay if you don't get every single one-of-one. It's okay if you let some things slide and be patient for the next round whenever that comes, because online sales have kind of changed the whole atmosphere for buying for collectors over the last 20 years. It's been great.
Yeah.
But there's specific strategies I think are important for us to adopt when it comes to ensuring a stable market. So, good stuff, man. Thank you for watching another episode of Radicards TV and Radicards.com. Thank you, Brian Hayes of Linguist Sports Cards, for joining us. And until next time, enjoy collecting. If you like this video, please subscribe. Enjoy collecting. Thank you.